afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. This is episode 814. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is Monday, June 5th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control and he does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State before the great John Wayne desk. And we have a loaded up show for you. There was some tragedy over the weekend in Paris and also in Turin, Italy. The Paris climate agreement was in the news over the weekend about whether to pull out or stay in. And we have news from Nancy Pelosi, who has been reading a different Bible than I've been reading. So we're going to talk about that. Let me see here. Oh, I got a couple good articles about climate change from Murray Rothbard. I think he does. Murray Rothbard has done some of the best work on the economy, and in my time anyway. He's passed away, but I mean, I grew up not knowing who he was, but trying to get familiar with him now. He talks about proper response to climate change in an article, and also law, property rights, and air pollution is another article. It's a long article, so I'm not going to read that on the air, but it will be at the show notes page at the danclementshow.com and put up in the link there, which I'll get caught up on I don't have all the show notes pages due to the problem I had on Friday with the power outage and affecting both of my computers and trying to get everything settled out with that. Okay. Over the weekend, Wissam was a guest speaker. He gave 3 lessons on Saturday night about Islam and Christianity and his walk, not only from Baghdad to America, but from Islam to New Testament Christianity. Did a very good job. I'll have a page up on the danclementshow.com that you can go to, and we have the audio up at the Susquehanna Valley Church of Christ.org website of all the lessons. The video will be edited and putting slides in, so it's a really nice production. They videotaped all the sessions on Saturday, and I believe they did the morning Bible lesson and the sermon on Sunday. So we have that to look forward to as far as in video. So, but my question was, and he brought up a question on Sunday that or made a statement about folks grow up, and it doesn't matter if it's religious, political, environmental, whatever the ethnic, racial, whatever. They grow up believing in mom and dad's values and what they're being taught, but not really owning them, not really internalizing them, not really sitting down and studying them. Not everybody. There are a group, I don't know what the percentages are, but I'd say the vast majority of folks grow up the way I'm going to describe, and there's just a few that actually sit down and study what their parents are trying to teach them. And it's this, that they don't internalize it and they don't own it, even though they claim to be whatever it is. And I'm going to leave race out of this, because race, you're born that way. And on this program, as far as sexuality, we don't do any of the gender nonsense. There's only 2 genders, male, female. Sorry. Now, is there a mix-up of genders when someone's born with both? Yes. But that's the exception, not the rule. Okay? And I get tired of anti-freedom groups out there trying to govern by the exception and not the rule of thumb, for the vast majority of people. Just like homosexuality, the LGBT community only makes up 3% of the population in the United States. Yet, the way everybody's acting, they're the majority in the United States. So they are actually the exception, not the norm, not the rule in society. But anyway, so do we really know what we're taught growing up? I grew up Catholic, and quite honestly, and I think this was on purpose by the Catholic Church, that we didn't know what we needed to know to be good Catholics. We needed what they wanted us to know to be Catholics. And they were, up until 1973, the parishioners, the layperson, was not even encouraged to read the scriptures. They were supposed to get their scriptures through the priest, the local priest. And so, they could have been, making up stories for all we know. So it's an issue. It really is an issue. And a lot of times, folks, just to please mom and dad, they go along to get along. But they really don't internalize, they really don't own what mom and dad are trying to say. And until they get out to be adults and start doing some research and finding some of, or actually running into some of life's harsh realities, that's only then and only then do they start questioning how they were raised and what they were taught. And that was true with me, and that's true with a lot of people, but I need to ask people's forgiveness because I wasn't affording that same benefit of the doubt, especially to the Muslim community. My thought was that, all Muslims were devout, and if a moderate Muslim didn't speak out against terrorism, it was because they knew in their heart of hearts that the Quran actually approves jihad and approves, the killing of infidels, as the Quran states it. But Wissam made a statement, and it was true for him, and it's true for a lot of folks that he studies with. A lot of Muslims don't know exactly what the Quran says because they've never read it. It's something they grew up with, the prayer life and everything like that, which a lot of Muslims don't follow. And, the 5 times a day, call to prayer in the morning and all that kind of stuff, they don't follow it because they never made it their own. They never made it their own, and their parents didn't do anything to encourage that, like with home Bible studies. And I'm guilty of that too. I didn't always have as many home Bible studies as I needed to with my children, especially with my son and and my wife. And I apologize for that. We're trying to get better at that. So we know, I study the Bible, but my wife and my son may not study like I do, and they may not understand the Bible the way the Bible is intended to be understood. So that actually needs to be taught. And the same thing goes with, I deal a lot with the Constitution. And it appalls me how many people in America, how many citizens, how many folks in America don't know the Constitution. And they should. And sometimes I don't give them the benefit of the doubt because no one sat down and studied with them or even talked about it. Okay? So I have to be more merciful and gracious when it comes to these things. I have to be more patient with folks, as it were. All right. Rocky Mountain High Brands is the official drink of the Dan Clement Show. This is something I found through a friend of mine named Roger. And full disclosure, I do own stock in the company. They have all these flavors right now. I'm drinking an energy drink called coconut lime flavor, and it's pretty decent for what it is. And I wasn't sure about the flavor, but hey, it actually does taste pretty good for being an energy drink. I'm not huge on energy drinks, but they have different flavors. They have a mango, and they have a berry energy drink, and they have energy shots and bars, and they have a alkaline water that they sell, Eagle Spirit, I believe it is. They have just a straight lemonade, carbonated lemonade, and they have a straight black iced tea, which I really like. My favorite ones is the lemonade and the black iced tea, because the lemonade reminds me of Fresca. But this is I've decided to make this the official drink of the Dan Clement Show. And I do own stock, and they're building a bottling plant up in the Catskills off of Interstate 87 around Kingston, New York, and they weren't supposed to get the plant ready till the end of 2018, I think it was, but they've actually put it on an accelerated schedule. And so I've heard reports that it might be done as early as spring of next year instead of late 2018. So that's good news for the stock. That's good news for the company and everything. And it is a penny stock. I just let everybody know. And it is part of my retirement portfolio. So I'm kind of rooting for it to take off. But it's not the only part of my retirement portfolio, folks. All right. Today's daily Bible reading is out of the book of Hosea, chapter 4, verse 6. Just one verse here. And this is very, very important. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I also will reject you from being priest for me, because you have forgotten the law of your God. I also will forget your children. Now, one of the duties of the priests was to make sure that the children of Israel knew the law. That was one of their duties. And they failed to do that for many, many years. Matter of fact, when the young man Josiah became king and they were cleaning up the palace and the temple, they found a copy of the old law. And it was, in with a bunch of other papers, garbage actually. And he brought that out and had it read, and to all the people, made sure all the people were knowledgeable that they had that, and it was read to them. Quote mail comes from Mrs. C.T. Whitemell. In darkness there is no choice. It is light that enables us to see the difference between things, and it is Christ who gives us light. Can't see things in the dark, folks. You really can't. And that goes right along with our theme about knowledge and everything. Today's short Bible lesson is by Al Shannon from biblicalproof.wordpress.com, The Last Will and Testament of Jesus Christ. Al goes through and he compares the Old Testament to the New Testament and makes some very pertinent points about that. So if you want a good Bible lesson when it comes to the Last Will and Testament of Jesus Christ, go to the DanClementShow.com and click on episode 814, and you'll see the short Bible lesson there. I put the first three things, my daily Bible reading, quote meal, and short Bible lesson. Those titles are always in bold type, so you can your eye goes right to them, and you can see the links for them. All right, let's see here where we're going here. Something happened early this morning. An Orlando shooting, 5 people dead after a disgruntled employee opens fire, police says. And this is a Fox News report. Officers respond to a call about an active shooter at Fiamma off Forsyth Road in Orange County near Full Sail University just after 8 a.m. Orange County Sheriff Jerry Deming said in a news conference deputies arrived 2 minutes later where they found 3 men and a woman dead. At the scene, a 5th person, a man, was rushed to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. Seven people survived the shooting. Deming said that the alleged shooter who killed himself was identified as 45-year-old man who had been fired from Fiamma, F-I-A-M-M-A, Incorporate, an awning manufacturing company, back in April. The employee had a criminal history, minor in nature, with arrest for possession of marijuana and DUI. Officers had been called to the company back in June 2014 for a workplace violence incident in which he allegedly battled another employee here in the business, Deming said. So we have that. That's an ongoing thing this morning here, so that'll be developing during the week here. I just want to make sure we're getting everything in order here. All right. Along with the Paris or the London attack over the weekend, there was also in Turin, Italy, and this is something that sort of got lost in the news. But a friend of mine, Rod Eccles, actually shared this with me on Facebook. This is by sportsyahoo.com. Turin bomb scare sparks stampede, leaving 1,500 injured. Juventus supporters carry an injured woman in Piazza San Carlo in Turin after a stampede in the fan zone where fans were watching the Champions League final between Juventus and Real Madrid on a giant screen on June 3rd. Italy, more than 1,500 people were injured, 3 seriously, after a bomb scare triggered a stampede among Juventus fans watching the Champions League final in Turin, local authorities said Sunday. In an update on Saturday's dramatic events in a square packed with supporters watching the Cardiff match on a giant screen, the local prefecture said 1,527 had been treated for mainly minor injuries. So this it was a busy weekend with terror threats and terror attacks. So I just wanted to point that out to make sure we're not losing anything in the just to let you be aware, and hopefully you're well informed. Most of my listeners and my friends on Facebook and on YouTube and stuff like that seem to be well informed. So hopefully that's still the case. Let me see here. Oh, the Paris Treaty, right? This is big in the news. That President Trump is said to want to be pulling out of the accords. Now, let me put this out to begin with. These accords are non-binding on the United States. No matter what President Obama did, signing anything, he didn't bring them back and present them to the Senate and just started implementing the Paris Accords. That's unconstitutional. He has to get the treaty ratified per the Constitution in order for it to take effect and govern things here in the United States, and he didn't do that. And so I don't know what the big brouhaha is about pulling out of an accord that we were never party to begin with. One man was a party to it, and that was President Obama. He does not have the constitutional authority to implement a treaty without it being ratified by the Senate. I mean, folks, there's a lot of political turmoil that could be avoided if we would just stop, sit down for a few hours, read through the Constitution and do a little studying in the Constitution. Have open on your web browser Merriam-Webster's 1828 dictionary, which defines the words of the time, which some of them have changed their meaning to the day. And if you come across a hard word in the Constitution, go to the dictionary and define it. That helps you understand better the Constitution and keep everything in context in the Constitution. The main context in the Constitution is this is a limiting document. It limits the federal government and what they can do. And so you got to read everything in that document in that context. So this is a CNS News article by Teresa Smith put out on June 1st. Paris Treaty, big business tells Trump to stay in, free market groups say get out. And whenever you see, I'm sorry folks, and this is something I do automatically, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm overthinking things too much. Whenever I see anybody talk about big business, my mind automatically replaces that with crony capitalists. It really does. And if you look through some of these firms and listen on the news reports as I have, a lot of these big companies or big business are the crony capitalists that may benefit financially from this redistribution of wealth. And that's what the Paris Accords is. They're taking wealth in the United States and giving it to emerging companies or countries. And the funny thing is, they're calling it saving the environment because there's human-caused climate change. Now, they never say it that way because they know if they start saying human-caused climate change, people are going to be very skeptical of that. The opinion of some of America's largest companies is at odds with free market organizations over President Trump's eagerly awaited decision on the Paris Agreement on climate regulations. 24 CEOs of large companies sent a letter, there's a link in there, to President Trump yesterday urging him to keep the United States in the Paris Agreement. Again, we're not technically in it. It was what President Donald Trump did was unconstitutional. So to me, that's a non-starter. You know, we were never in the accords constitutionally to begin with. Just like there's a lot of things that the federal government does that is unconstitutional, and if somebody does something that goes against a government regulation that's unconstitutional, then they're thought to be strange or something like that because we want to invoke the Constitution. No, we want to follow the law. The Constitution is still the law of the land. We want to follow the law. We the undersigned, wait a minute, let me get in here a second. However, 44 free market organizations such as Heritage Foundation, the Eagle Forum, and Competitive Enterprise Institute encourage the president's withdrawal in the letter sent on May 8th. We undersigned write enthusiastic support of your campaign commitments to withdraw fully from the Paris Climate Treaty, to stop all taxpayer funding of UN global warming programs. The big business CEO told the president that remaining in the Paris Agreement would support U.S. competition, grow job market from clean energy technology, and reduce the risk of infrastructure and damage from climate change. Now, I've been doing some research. I don't know if I'm going to get to it one of my letters today or later on this week, but there has been some. I think it was a article from Mises.org, and it might be today. Like I said, I got a lot of things going on here, where the green energy job sector actually producing energy for anybody, but especially the United States, is the worst economic idea in the world of economic ideas. I mean, it is so bad, not only bad environmentally, because of the minerals, the raw earth minerals that they need, or rare earth minerals that they need to construct the photovoltaic cells and other parts like in the windmills and stuff like that. And we don't even allow their mining in the United States anymore because of the health hazards and the hazards to the environment. Because of that, we buy the stuff from China, and their people are dying. The environments over around that area where they're mining, and in the different areas that they're mining, is actually being harmed greatly. Just so we have this green energy, and this green energy is not as efficient as people think it is. It's more costly, and if we went the way the Paris Climate Accord wants to go, the only people that are going to make money in the green sector are crony capitalists. Like, I know a lot of people like this guy, Elon Musk. He is a crony capitalist. He spent close to $600,000 on lobbying efforts, and he claimed, well, I really don't need the money, but his company has benefited to the tune of like 4.9, almost $5 billion, either in tax credits or actual subsidies that he gets, but he doesn't need the money. Of course he doesn't. He has all of our money already. And we call that, in economics, they call that a rent seeker, folks. They call that a rent seeker. On the other hand, free market organizations agreed with Trump when he campaigned that the Paris Climate Agreement did not fit the vision of the U.S. We agreed that the treaty is not in the interest of the American people, and the U.S. should therefore not be party to it. The letter explained that the standards set up by the Obama administration set the bar too high for the U.S. and her industries. By 2020, America must reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 17% below 2005 levels and reduce emissions to 28% below 2005 levels by 2025, said the free market organizations. These regulations pile on top of other requirements of the Paris Agreement. And folks, can I stop real quickly here? They have the Paris Agreement. What's going to stop them 5 years? Let's say we gave into it. We gave them all the money. What's going to stop them from 5 years down the road to go to, you name the city, Rio de Janeiro Climate Summit, or Christchurch Climate Summit over there in New Zealand. What you name the place, right? Some faraway place is going to take a lot of fossil fuels to fly these folks there. Hotels that's going to cost the taxpayers of the respective countries gobs of money. What's going to stop them from increasing? Well, we haven't done enough. We need more money to take care of this, so we need to increase the money. These targets, these targets need to be more stringent. What's going to stop them from in the future increasing everything if we sign on to this accord to begin with? Nothing. It isn't. And so it's all a sham, folks. It is. Human caused climate change is all a sham. And we really need to start looking at it that way, because they're saying it's human caused, and there are scientists out there that have been doing these historical studies and stuff like that, and we've had climate cycles up and down throughout history, throughout recorded history. We've had these climate cycles, and CO2 is such a minor driver as far as climate is concerned. The biggest greenhouse gas is water vapor. Who'd have thunk? It's water vapor, and there's a lot of other things that they talk about. But this, again, this Paris Climate Accord is unconstitutional because it was never ratified by the Senate. It just wasn't. All right. I got to get to this one. This one here. Nancy Pelosi sticks her foot in it again. Pelosi says withdrawing from climate deal dishonors God. And this is from the CNS News staff, June 2nd, cnsnews.com. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, Democrat, California, said at a press briefing today, this is June 2nd now, that withdrawing the United States from the Paris Accord on climate change dishonors God. Okay, when the anti-freedom folks and the progressives try to invoke morality, they have a different idea of what morality actually is instead of what godly morality. They actually look at a humanist reality, but try to invoke God's name to bolster their stance or arguments in their humanist morality. She goes on to say, the Bible tells us that to minister to the needs of God's creation is an act of worship, Pelosi said. To ignore those needs is to dishonor the God who made us, and that it's just what we're doing by walking away from the cords. And they have an excerpt from her briefing on this. And she goes on to say, when the people went to the White House, he talked about the dangers of air pollution when he was here. And just last week, the Pope met, and she's talking about the Pope here, with President Trump and gave him a copy of his encyclical, Laudate Si, which made the case for strong, urgent action to halt the climate crisis. The Pope wrote, the climate is a common good belonging to all and meant for all. The Bible tells us to minister to God's needs of the creation is an act of worship. To ignore those needs is to dishonor God, to make us who made us, and that's just what we're doing by walking away from the Accords. And this is in Nancy Pelosi's statement. Now, I use eSword. I have eSword on my desktop. I have a MySword on my Android, which is real similar to eSword on my Android phone. So I always have a Bible with me. As a matter of fact, it's actually a Bible studying tool. I did a word search. And there is no statement in the Bible that even comes close to what she's saying. Matter of fact, in the book of Genesis, God gave man dominion over the creation. You know, grow and subdue, multiply, procreate, and subdue. Doesn't say destroy, just says subdue. And what happens is Nancy Pelosi she's a quote-unquote Catholic, but if you listen to her statements and her thought processes, which is difficult to do, her ideology and her thoughts align more with the secular humanist agenda. Even this thought, where man is, we're supposed to take care of nature because we're supposed to be subservient to nature. That's what humanists think, secular humanists. And I don't like to keep saying that because, you can interchange, a humanist is secular, okay? And that's what humanists think. We are to be good stewards of what God has blessed us with, but good stewards doesn't mean we bow down and worship nature like the humanists want us to, like the watermelon environmentalists want us to do, that all these people are talking about. How cattle are killing the world and people who eat meat are murderers. And I remember this one lady, it was on a news item, she held up a sign that eating eggs is murder. And as far as I know, you don't kill the laying hen to get the eggs, and the eggs are not fertilized, so there's not an embryo or anything. It's just a yolk and a white, egg white. So drinking milk is murder. That was another one I saw. And some of these, I don't know if they were just jokes that were being put out, but it just, to me, folks like Nancy Pelosi, and people listen to her and will take these things at face value. And this is what I was talking about earlier, earlier in the show. We don't know what we're taught. We don't go and question it. We don't go study it and see if what we're taught is the truth. And there's too many people out there that take the word of Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, and other politicians, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, Paul Ryan, and you name your favorite Republican, you name your favorite Democrat, or your favorite philosopher, or whatever. And too many times people take them at face value that, well, they're not going to lie to me, so what they said was true, when they could be lying to your face through their teeth because they know you're not going to go research it. You're not going to take the time to do that. So Nancy Pelosi is invoking the Bible, and there's some verses in the Bible that talk about, back in Exodus, and when the law was given, if you add on to this law, the plagues of this book will be added on to you. And the same way in the book of Revelation, in the last chapter, talking about, if you add to the books of this prophecy, things will be added to you, and if you take away from this, your place in the book of life will be taken away. Pretty severe punishments for adding or taking away from God's word. And that's why we need to be very careful, rightly dividing or rightly handling the word of God, as Paul would tell Timothy. So I just thought this was funny, how a humanist like Nancy Pelosi is trying to invoke God and saying we dishonor God, when there is no biblical backing for what she said. And I don't need to go to Bible scholars. I know in my thoughts, in my mind, in the Bible, my research and everything, that she's just empty words. She's just empty words. Okay, let's see here. Let's get down to some more things. I'm not sure, like I said, I've got a bunch of these. I've been doing so much research on these. Well, Murray Rothbard was an economist in the Austrian vein of economists, and pretty much Austrian economists are free market capitalists. They believe in the free markets. They believe that the freer the economy is, the more robust it's going to be, and they've actually proven that. Not statistically, but historically, they've actually proven that. Guys like Tom Woods, if you go Google his name, Thomas E. Woods, he has a website, he has a podcast, he talks about these. He's a historian by teaching, by his education, and self-taught Austrian economist. And he looks at the historical things and puts economy to that, or the idea of Austrian economics to that. And it's amazing. It's amazing how, if we were listening to some of the Keynesian economists today and the way things are being run in the country today at the founding of our country, we would still be, we would never arose to a first world country. We never would have. We'd still have been floundering. We'd be as bad or worse than Europe if we'd have listened to economists, Keynesian economists like Paul Krugman, who has a Nobel Prize. And yet, if you listen, matter of fact, Bob Murphy and Tom Woods, and they don't pay me to say this, but I listen to them. It's called Contra Krugman. They actually go in and critique his Paul Krugman's articles, his columns, and they show how erroneous he is. Now, sometimes he gets things right, and they'll give him credit for that, but how erroneous he is. But this is a article by Curtis Williams posted on March 9th of this year. Rothbard explains the proper response to climate change. In 1982, Rothbard published a lengthy article titled Law, Property Rights, and Air Pollution, which I have a link to in the show notes page for you, which laid out a free market, private property-based approach to environmental issues. Discussing air pollution, Rothbard concluded, if A is causing pollution of B's air, and this can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then this is an aggression, and it should be enjoined and damages paid. It means it should be adjudicated. In his view, the legal system, not government regulation, is responsible for solving environmental issues, because in libertarian theory, it is only permissible to proceed coercively against someone if he is a proven aggressor, and that aggression must be proven in court or in arbitration beyond a reasonable doubt. Any statute or administrative regulation necessarily makes actions illegal that are not overt intentions of crimes or torts. Okay, the Clean Water Act by the EPA, and someone having a small wet area on their farm that might be out in the field. Oh, that's a wetland. You can't do anything with it. Things like that. That the regulations do, the idiocy of regulations sometimes, and the harm it does. In reality, there is no such thing as environmental issues. There's only human conflict over the use of scarce resources. For example, if I start dumping toxic chemicals into your lake and you object to it, this isn't really an environmental issue. Rather, it is a dispute over the ownership of the lake. If I own the lake, I can do with it as I please. However, if I damage the lake owned by someone else, I've damaged their property and should be held liable. This conclusion has far-reaching implications. Instead of relying on government regulation to somehow save a vaguely defined environment, it would be up to the victims of pollution to prove that they were harmed in a court of law. Now, I know what the anti-freedom group's arguments is to this, and they won't call them this, but the crony capitalists have such deep pockets that they can tie this up in court for years and nothing will come of it. And that's true. That could happen. That could happen. But in our history in the United States, that really doesn't hold true, because in the end, they're always held accountable. They're always held accountable. Julie Roberts played a character, a true story of water pollution in a town that she went after for a law firm. And I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I just remember the movie and the story. And they actually, in the end, they won. In the end, they won damages from the company because the company couldn't hide that. So libertarian thought, Austrian economic thought says private property rights can do more. Free market private property rights can do more to protect the environment than any regulations. And I believe that's true, because we have a Department of EPA, and what have they actually done? We shared reports on Friday talking about 1975 to 2010, I think it was. Water quality's been stagnant, stays the same. Even though we passed all these regulations and spent billions of dollars on it, there's no improvement. It's still the same. So what, in my mind, a bureaucracy is nothing but a redistribution of wealth from the people or citizens of a country to the bureaucracy so they can have a job. So the government can employ you, you can be part of a union, and that union dues get cycled back into campaign contributions, and you got a big voting block there because the government's giving you your job. And this is what's so insidious about bureaucracies. They're unelected. For the most part, Congress sets them up unconstitutionally to begin with, and then they just sort of run their own. They really don't go back and do any oversight. They really don't go back and say, hey, I think you're overreaching here. We need to review some of your regulations and maybe tweak them or get rid of them, or whatever the case may be. So, and I predict this, folks, that President Trump's EPA, that unconstitutional bureaucracy, they're going to start facing, from the anti-freedom groups here in America, they're going to start facing multiple lawsuits to actually enforce the regulations that are on the books. And my advice to the Trump EPA is remove those regulations off the books, and then they don't have anything to sue you over if they're not on the books. Now, they could sue to have them put back on the books, but honestly, I don't know how that actually works. And using the courts to force a bureaucracy to put something back on the books they take off, that's pretty sketchy. So Rothbard, I think, does a very good job of explaining things with the environment. If I remember right, and this might be next couple days shows, I think Thomas Sowell wrote an article, and he talks about some things in there with green energy. I'm like I said, I've been doing so much research on it. Everything's sort of going together on this. Let's see here. The amazing arrogance, and this is another good article over at fee.org. The amazing arrogance of the climate agreement. And this is by Jeffrey Tucker, written on June 1st of this year. It was December 12, 2015, when headlines in the world's newspapers in implausibly bold type, celebrated the historic agreement in Paris between all nations of the world to curb carbon emissions and thereby stop climate change. Or so they said, if the elites get to say what it is and is not historic. The spin, like the argument itself, is crammed down our throats. Energy stocks weren't affected in the slightest by the diplomatic agreement. I read the stories that day and the next day and the next, and the continuing coverage for weeks that nearly every reader, apart from a few dedicated activists and permanent regime bureaucrats, ignored. The stories appeared on the international pages and didn't touch the business pages. Energy stocks weren't affected. The stories had all the signs of a dutiful public servant's announcement, fake news, as they say today, and they contained not a single quote from a single dissenting voice because, of course, no respectable news outlet would give voice to a climate denier. That's what I are. I'm a climate denier, folks, because they're talking about human-caused climate change. Of course, there's climate change that we can neither stop nor increase. I'm serious. Anyway, deniers, let me pause to protest this denier language. It's attempts to appropriate the widely shared disgust towards Holocaust denial, a bizarre and bedraggled movement that belittles or even dismisses the actual history of one of the 20th century's most egregious mass crimes against human rights and dignity. Using that language to silence questions about an attempt to certainly plan the energy sector is a moral low that debases the language of denial. The rhetorical trick reveals all you need to know about the desperate manipulation the climate planners are willing to engage in to realize their plot regardless of popular and justified skepticism concerning the regulatory and redistributionist policies. And you wonder why people have doubt about it. And what are the specifics of that agenda? The Paris Agreement is a voluntary agreement because architects knew it would never pass the U.S. Senate as a treaty. Why? Because the idea of the agreement is that the U.S. government regulatory agencies would impose extreme mandates on the energy sector. How should it work? What kinds of emissions it should produce? The best ways to power our lives? Read not fossil fuels. That's very important, folks. And hand over to the developing world regime billions and even trillions of dollars in aid at direct and ongoing forcible transfer of wealth from American taxpayers to regimes all over the world at the expense of American freedom and prosperity. And you wonder why people have doubts about it. And I'm going to stop reading. It talks about Trump's reaction in there. It goes on a little bit further, the backlash from all this, and how dare anyone dispute our plans, and rejecting elitist politics. And that's everything rolled up into this. But the one thing I want to say here about this, about the denying and stuff like that, is this. Again, we're denying that humans cause climate change. There's not enough of us. We're not doing, like CO2. They keep saying that all the CO2 we're spitting out is bad. But if you go to, and like I said, I'm going to have this later on this week here about the great climate swindle. Biomass decay, leaves, grass, you mowing your grass and it decaying and stuff like that, leaves dropping in the fall and decaying, trees dropping and decaying, put off way more carbon dioxide than humans ever thought they could. I don't know what we could do to match that CO2 output just by vegetation dying and decaying. Secondly, the ocean is a huge regulator of CO2. The cooler it gets, for some reason, the more it absorbs CO2. And the warmer it gets, the more it releases CO2. So how are we going to stop that, especially on the releasing side? CO2 is a greenhouse gas that's causing heating and warming up, which the historical charts say, as one of my favorite comedians say, nay, nay. The temperatures always rose decades ahead of the carbon dioxide rising. So how can the carbon dioxide, and This is a cycle that happened, the ice core studies, all this kind of stuff. And this cycle has repeated throughout history and has never deviated. Temperatures always rose, and then decades later, 20, 30, 40 years later, then the carbon dioxide rose and then started falling again as the temperatures fell. But it was always lagged behind the temperatures. So how can CO2 be a driver of human-caused climate change when it doesn't even drive the temperature? And the biggest thing that is never talked about in these with this human-caused climate change, and we're causing it, the biggest driver of climate change is the sun. And there's actually been some guys, I think it was a professor, I watched this documentary, I got to watch it again. This MIT professor actually went back and to the earliest time they started documenting sunspots. And during the lowest activities of sunspots is when we've had like our little ice ages. Like at the founding of our country, when it was really cold and everything. And the higher the activity of sunspots, the warmer the planet gets. The biggest driver, and I've actually, just a thought just came into my head. Because I'm a big sci-fi buff. There has been some notions put forward, some ideas put forward that some people have taken into effect. Well, the sun does affect our climate. So what we need to do is put these great big solar sunshades, deploy them in the outer space to block some of the sun coming on the planet. And again, like these CO2 scrubbers that they're building to take CO2 out of the air. Again, where is your study to show what that effect's going to be? They were talking about, I remember one time, they were talking about capturing CO2 out of power plants and injecting it into the ground, like putting in great big underground caverns. But what's that going to do to the planet? What happens if we have an earthquake and that underground cavern gets ruptured and releases millions of tons of CO2 all at once? And if there's a population around there and there's a big old cloud of CO2's coming around, people are going to die. But I haven't seen anything to address that. What are the unseen, again, like the unseen things in the economy? What are some of the things that can happen? The unseen things that can happen if you do this. If you shade the sun, how do you know if you're shading it too much or too little? And what happens if you shade it too much and you really cause an artificial cooling well beyond what the actual atmosphere would do on regulating itself? Then what happens? But you don't hear them talking about that. Honestly, they don't know. To be quite honest, they don't know. As far as I'm concerned, God put everything in motion, and he did it for a reason. And I think it's beyond arrogant to think that mankind can control the global climate or even affect it in any meaningful way today. I'm sorry. And as we keep continuing to go on and talk about free markets like we did on Friday, and talk about how free markets and the richer a society is, the cleaner environmentally it is. It goes hand in hand. And it's not something that they do on purpose. It's just through the free markets you have more money to spend, and you can do things more economically. And I gave this example on Friday's show. Up until this last year, for 14 years, I burned an outdoor wood furnace because for me it was economical. Now, trees actually, within their wood, they actually trap carbon. And when you burn it, you release carbon dioxide. So I was really adding to the carbon footprint, but there was a lot of work to go into that. I had to get the wood on property, I had to cut it, had to split it, had to stack it, and then I had to feed that monster all winter, 3 or 4 times a day, depending on the temperature, because it was a smaller stove. I wish I'd have got the next size up and I only had to do it like twice a day. But even then, I was doing a lot of work because of health reasons, and because I do have a little bit of money set aside that I've been saving up for this. I'm switching over to propane, liquid propane, LP. It's a condensing furnace, 98% efficient hot water furnace, and that's going in my basement. And Because of that, my carbon footprint's going to drop dramatically. And that's because I have more, I'm a little bit older. I have a little bit of money, not a lot, but I had to do, I put aside money to maintain the house. I got to do the roof yet too. But you see what I'm saying? As societies get more affluent, we talked about this on Friday's show, in the poorer countries, the only way they have to heat their houses sometimes, or even cook, even in the more temperate areas, is to cut down trees and use charcoal, because they don't have access to the cheap fossil fuels like we do. Because of one, private property rights, and two, because of the socialist governments that they live under. So they don't have access to that cheap energy. And for the Paris Climate Change Accords to just keep saying, well, we need to give them money to go into green energy. Again, I'm going to be sharing later on this week an article by Thomas Sowell where he goes into this, and they talk about, like I said, I'm not sure if it's Thomas Sowell, but after the show, I'm going to be doing some research, make sure I get that out this week. But they actually put a graph up where they were talking about how much it cost to produce so many kilowatts of energy with coal, natural gas, water, wind, and solar. And solar by far is the most expensive way, most labor-intensive way to produce electricity, which means your price is going to go up. It's not scalable. When the sun doesn't shine, it doesn't work. It can only supplement your electricity, not replace it. And again, I've said